Okay, so in the last few minutes, we've been talking about an inyan of Eretz Yisrael. Sorry, excuse me. I just want to confirm. I see Shmuel is with us. Shmuel, were we able to get the handout to everyone?
Yes. Can the Rav hear me?
I don't hear you, so it's either this or this. Okay. Baruch Hashem, our Mamuna. Okay. Eliezer Entel is the Mamuna on when we can start. And Shmuel is our Mamuna on getting out all the handouts. So we're running like a little Beis Hamikdash here. We have all kinds of supervisors. Maybe one day we'll work our way up to having 15 supervisors. But right now we only have a few of them. So the Gemara in Baba Metzia, we talk about how special Eretz Yisrael is. We covered the 3 weeks. We've mentioned, of course, we have to be Mesaken the Chet HaMeraglim during these 3 weeks. Tisha B'Av starts with the Chet HaMeraglim. The Raglim came back and persuaded the Jewish people not to go to Eretz Yisrael. And night of Tisha B'Av, tonight, Tisha B'Av at night in the year 2449, the Jewish people were crying and said, we don't want to go to Eretz Yisrael. And that is the trigger for Tisha B'Av to become a day of Churban. Rebbeinu Shalom said, I did so much for you. I want to bring you into Eretz Yisrael, and you're crying for nothing. So I'll give you a reason to cry. Yet Hashem, we still have plenty of time today. Rebbeinu Shalom can take away all our reasons for crying on Tisha B'Av. Rebbeinu Shalom, please do so. We're doing our very best, Rebbeinu Shalom, under very difficult circumstances. And it's already time. So there's plenty of time, Rebbeinu Shalom, today to stop this and begin the Binyan Beis HaMikdash and Mashiach Tzidkenu. Okay, so the Gemara in Bava Metzia on the Nun Ches Amud Beis says, we're talking about the terrible aveira of embarrassing someone in public. So the Gemara says, Bava Metzia Nun Ches Amud Beis, Amalei Abaye LeRav Dimi. Abaye said to Rav Dimi, B'ma'arova, in Eretz Yisrael, in Talmud Bavli, which is in Babylon, they refer to Eretz Yisrael as Ma'arova. There's a yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael called Ma'arova. Ma'arova comes from the word Ma'ariv, to the west. Eretz Yisrael is to the west of Babel. So the Babylonians would call Eretz Yisrael Ma'arova. So Abaye said to Rav Dimi, B'ma'arova, B'ma'izahim. In Eretz Yisrael, in those days, what are the Jews in Eretz Yisrael very careful about? What are they very makbid about? Amalei, so Rav Dimi said to him, Ba'achvare ape. Here in Eretz Yisrael, we're very careful not to shame another person. Achvare ape means to make his face white. When you shame a person, his face grows white, then he blushes, then his face gets white. There's a rush of blood, and then the blood leaves. At any rate, it's called achvri ape, making someone face white. In other words, shaming someone. So Rav Dimi said in Eretz Yisrael, we're very, very careful not to, God forbid, shame anyone. Domer Rabbi Chanina, why are we so makbid on this in Eretz Yisrael? Because Rabbi Chanina taught us. Hakol yordim legehenim oilam. Every Jew who has to go through the Gehenna process, he goes through the Gehenna process for whatever time it is, and then he leaves Gehenna. Chutz mishloisha sheyordim bein oilam. There are 3 people who go to Gehenna and don't get out of Gehenna. We're not going to go into this part of the Gemara. There's a Tosfos here, what that means. This is what the Gemara says. There are 3 people that go into Gehenna, ve'ein olam, they don't come back out. They don't rise out. Ve'elohim. And one of the 3 is Hamal ben Pnei Chaveiro Barab. One, a person who publicly insults another Yid, he goes into Gehenna, he's one of the 3 people that doesn't come out. Whatever it means doesn't come out. But since Rabbi Chanina taught us the seriousness of insulting another person, that you don't even get out of Gehenna, again, whatever that means, here in Eretz Yisrael, we're very, very careful not to insult another Yid. So on that note about insulting another Yid, let's take a look at the Gemara in Gittin. People have sent me emails, people have called me. Generally, I think it's the last 10 or 11 years, I would daven Tisha B'Av in the morning at Eish Kodesh, and the Rebbe would ask me to speak during the Kinnis. I think I've done that for, 11 of the last 12 years or something like that. And we would start Kinnis, I think, at about 9:15, and we would do the Kinnis till about 1 o'clock, Mincha time. I'm not going to be doing that this year. I only daven at an outside meeting. I've not gone inside a shul. That's my own personal decision about what I need to do right now. And so I daven at an outdoor minyan. So I'm not going to be davening at Eish Kodesh. I'm not going to be talking about Kinnis. And several people have asked me if I would Zoom part of the Kinnis or part of an evening of Tisha B'Av tomorrow. I sent an email to Shmuel to find out if there was any interest in that, because people are doing different things. There are some people going to shul, some people are staying home, some people are davening an outdoor minyan. So to get a common time that works for everybody is a little difficult. So what I am proposing and what I'm willing to do is to begin at about 11 o'clock tomorrow morning via Zoom and talk. By that time, I will have probably finished Kinnis, but either maybe talk about Kinnis or talk about Tisha B'Av, talk about the Churban, talk about the Gemara in Gittin, a bit of which we'll see now. And we'll go from 11 to approximately 12:30, something like that. That's what I would be able to do under all the conditions of this Tisha B'Av. So if there's a general interest in that, please contact Shmuel. Everyone should have his email address because he's been emailing everybody. If you don't have his email address, you can email me or you can contact me after Shir. Right after Shir, I won't be available. I'm doing a special shlichus today. It's a very great privilege. I want to tell everyone a little story. Shmuel, if I have permission, Shmuel's son, I believe he's 8 or 9 years old. Baruch Hashem, he's well, he's fine, but he had to be in Bidud for a little time. And to occupy himself in Bidud, Shmuel, who learned with us, and he actually organized the Zoom from which we're all learning. And we've been learning since after Pesach in his Zuchus. We will learn Midas and Talmud. So he bought his son one of these huge, it's not even a puzzle. It's cardboard from which you can actually build a Beis Hamikdash. And his son spent his time in Bidud building this Beis Hamikdash. He was so proud of this Beis Hamikdash that he videoed it and sent me the video, and I saw the video. It's an amazing thing that he put together. It can be purchased in any store. It's an amazing thing. You can see the Beis Hamoked, you can see Lishkas HaGozes, you can see the Ulam, you can see the Eichel, you can see the Ezras Nashim, you can see it. It's absolutely amazing thing. I don't think it's very expensive, but just an amazing thing. So right after Shir today, I'm going to have a phone call with Shmuel's son to have him walk me through his Beis Hamikdash. So if you'd like to contact me a little about an hour after Shir, or contact Shmuel, or write me an email, and then later in the day we'll be able to contact everybody to see if this works out, to have a short Zoom tomorrow on Yonei Tisha B'Av beginning at about 11 a.m. Okay. Gittin Daf Nun Hey Amid Beis begins the sugya of the Churban of the second Beis Hamikdash. The sugya of the first Beis Hamikdash is recorded in the books of Nevi'im. We're learning the book of Yeshayahu Tuesday mornings. Yeshayahu lived about 140, 150 years before the Churban, and he's prophesying about the Churban. Yirmiyahu lived at the time of the Churban, and he's talking about the Churban. Yecheskel lived at the time of the Churban, and he's talking about the Churban. Yirmiyah wrote the book of Eicha, which tells us about the Churban. We have plenty of information about the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash because it's part of our Kisvei Kodesh, it's part of our holy books. We don't have any Nevi'im living at the end of the second Beis HaMikdash. The last Navi was Malachi, and he died approximately 40 years into the second Beis HaMikdash. So from the 40 years into the second Beis HaMikdash, thereafter there's no Navi. And there hasn't been a Navi since, notwithstanding what some people think. There's been no prophet since. So the last 380 years of the second Beis HaMikdash, there's no prophet. And that's why there's no official book of Hanukkah. The Hanukkah miracle occurs approximately 200 years into the second Beis HaMikdash. There are no prophets to write a prophet book about what happened with the Hashmonaim and the Yevanim. Therefore, our only source of knowledge about that comes from the Gemara. The Gemara tells us about the miracle of Hanukkah. We also have a Mishnah that hints to it. But our real information about Hanukkah is a Gemara Masechta Shabbos. Similarly, the Churban Beis HaMikdash, we have no books of prophets that tell us what happened at the time of the Churban Beis HaMikdash, because the Churban Beis HaMikdash occurred 380 years approximately after Malachi died. What's our source of knowledge about what led up to the event and how the Romans attacked Yerushalayim comes from Gemara. Otherwise, people read the book of Josephus, the Mishnah Berurah, the Chavetz Chaim says that's one of the things that's permitted to read on Tisha B'Av, the book of Josephus, whether it's an accurate historical narration of what happened or whether he was writing under the pressure of the Romans. As the saying goes, the victor always gets to write history. That's a historical question. But the real information about the Churban is in the Gemara. And it is condensed, most of it, in Masechta Gittin. Why does it end up in Masechta Gittin? It ends up in Masechta Gittin. That the Sfarim tell us that there's no such thing that's in a Masechta that has nothing to do with the Masechta. Hameima, Ravin, and Rav Ashi compiled the Gemara as we know it, and they didn't write Masechta Gittin to teach us how to write a get, and then they threw in some nice stories. And they wrote Masechta Ksubis, and every so often they threw in some nice stories. They wrote Masechta Shabbos, every so often they threw in these nice stories. These nice stories are called Agadata. Every so often, to give people a break, it's a very hard Masechta. Let's go in some stories here. Chas v'sholom. Amei Ravina Rashi puts certain things into certain Masechtas to teach you about that Masechta. Now, why is the Churban Beis HaMikdash in Masechta Gittin? Because we need to understand. As an example, when we were Makabel Torah at Har Sinai on Shavuos, the Medrash says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu came out to greet us like a chassan comes out to greet a kala. If you ever watched carefully at a chuppah, if it's the way it's supposed to happen, the chassan is under the chuppah already, and the kala comes out. And as the kala gets close to the chuppah, the chassan is supposed to take a couple of steps towards the kala to welcome her into the chuppah. So take a couple of steps forward. Likras kala. The Rebbeinu Shalom, as a marshal, the Medrash says, also at Har Sinai came out to greet us. The Rebbeinu Shalom is the chassan with a kala, happily married couple. At the time of the Churban, the Rebbeinu Shalom says, I need to part from you. We're going to separate. When you come back and you do tshuva, we can get back together. In the meantime, we're going to separate. What Masechta would you put the Churban Beis HaMikdash into if you have a concept that the relationship between the Rebbeinu Shalom and Klal Yisrael is the relationship of a man and his wife? Kim sois chosan al kala, yosis alayach elokoya. It's a chosan al kala. So if the chosan and kala are going to break up the home, the Churban bias, where would you put that story? You put a Masechta Gittin. The chosan and kala are going to break up. So Masechta Gittin, we have the condensed version of all the events that led up to the Churban of the second Beis HaMikdash by the Romans. And the Gemara begins as follows. It's on Nun Hey Amid Beis, there's an arrow next to it. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. I'm going to read the story quickly. Most of you know the story. I just want to point out something that's like air for us today as we prepare for Tisha B'Av in this Corona situation. Rabbi Yochanan said, what does it mean when Shlomo HaMelech said in Mishlei, fortunate is the person who's always scared, and a person that's stout-hearted, he's going to fall into something bad. What does that pasuk mean? So Rabbi Yochanan is now going to apply that pasuk to the Churban Beis Hamikdash. Rashi explains, mafached doesn't mean anxiety. It doesn't mean the fear of something bad. It means a thoughtful person. Doeg liros hanolad shlosera takola pakach imesezos. Pachad doesn't mean I'm scared, I'm suffering from anxiety. It means a person, when he's making a decision, he makes it carefully, thoughtfully. He's thinking about what are the ramifications of every decision he makes. If I do this, it's not just this. How many decisions do we make a day? There are very few decisions we make that are a vacuum decision. In other words, I decide to do this and it'll have no ripple effect on anything else in my life. How many decisions do we do that? Do we make a day like that? The majority of our decisions each day will affect other people or will affect ourselves. They all have ripple effects. Ashrei Adam Mafached Tomid, Rashi says, Mafached, Doeg Liris Ha'oila, Hanoila. He's a person that's worried to understand what's going to happen if I do something. Shloseret HaKol Bakach Im Esesais. I want to make sure that if I do this, nothing bad will happen from what I'm doing. What I may be doing is terrific. A ripple effect from it may be something bad. Learn the Mesilas Yesharim. He talks about, I believe in Perek Yutes or in Perek Chaf, about the Midas HaChasidus, the true chassid, the true quote-unquote pious person, is the person who thinks through everything, and even if he's about to do a wonderful thing, but he can see that it's going to have a bad effect somewhere on someone at some time, cease and desist. So, Ashrei Adam Mafached Tomid, fortunate is the person who's in this constant state of thoughtfulness. That's what Shlomo HaMelech means. He's in a constant state of thoughtfulness. Should I do this? Should I not do this? What are the ramifications? So Rabbi Yochanan introduces the whole Churban with this pasuk. And the reason he's going to introduce the whole Churban with this pasuk is because the Churban is going to occur because of things that were done without people taking into consideration the ripple effect of the most wonderful things they're doing, but without any consideration of the ripple effect. And because certain people did certain things, including certain great people, the Gemara is critical of certain great people. The Gemara says because these great people did what was right for the moment, but did not consider the full ripple effect of that moment, the Beis Hamikdash was going to be destroyed. That's why we have this introduction of Yochanan. Fortunate is the person who is Mafached Tomid. He's always thinking through the ramifications of what he's going to do. And a stout-hearted person is going to fall into a bad trap. A stout-hearted person, I'm just going to do what I want. I'm not thinking about it. I'm Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabbi Yochanan quoted the pasuk. So Rabbi Yochanan says, "Akamtza u'Bar Kamtza Chorb Yerushalayim." Because of these two individuals, Kamtza and Bar Kamtza, Yerushalayim was destroyed. Then it says, Atana Goyla B'Tana Goyla Chorev Turmalka. That's something we're not going to see today. Because of a chicken and a rooster, a major Jewish city on a mountain called Turmalka was wiped out by the Romans. Thousands, tens of thousands of Jews were killed over a chicken and a rooster. Ashaka Derispik Chorev Betar. Because of the side of a wagon in which someone was traveling, a Jewish person was traveling, and there's a whole story to this, but because the side of a wagon, all of Beitar, was destroyed. Now, these things did not happen at the same time. First, there was the Churban Beis HaMikdash. Years later, the Romans came back and destroyed Tur Malka because of the chicken and the rooster. And then after that, they came back and destroyed Beta again because of the side of a wagon. We can only learn today quickly Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. And I'll point out certain things about Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. The point I want to get to is that things need to be thought through. The lesson of the Churban Beis HaMikdash that we're approaching is think through the simplest things and consider what the ramifications will be. Don't just think about what you're doing right now, think about the ramifications. So it says, Akamsa ubar kamsa chav Yushalayim. What's that story? The Hugavra derachma kamsa. There's a certain person, we're going to call this person Hahu Gavra. We don't even know his name. Hahu Gavra, he had a friend by the name of Kamsa. Ubal de Babe, and he had a person that he was in a big fight with, a person he hated. His name was Bar Kamsa. So these names are interchangeable. Kamsa, Bar Kamsa, you can get them confused. This is interesting Jewish names. You have a Jew called Kamsa, a Jew called Bar Kamsa. What is a Kamsa? The Maharal comments that in Aramaic, a kamsa is an ant. If you look in the Parshas Hamaraglim, which is connected to Tisha B'Av, in the Parshas Hamaraglim, the Meraglim came back and reported to Klal Yisrael that there were giants in Eretz Yisrael. We're scared of the giants. And the Meraglim said, "V'anihi beinenu kachagovim v'chein hayinu beineim." We were so small in compared to these giants, we felt like chagovim, like grasshoppers or ants. We felt so small. The Targum Onkelos, the Aramaic translation on the word chagovim, is kamsa. So the Maharal points out that one of the forms of Lashon Hara that the Meraglim used was chagovim, kamsa, were like ants. And the story of the Churban, thousands of years later, 2,000 years later, approximately, whatever it is about a kamsa and a bar kamsa. So there are two Jews, ant and the son of an ant, kamsa and bar kamsa. A certain person has a good friend kamsa, and his enemy is bar kamsa. Ovitsu dosa. So the Hahu Gavra, we don't know his name, but some guy, we'll call him Guy throws a big party. Amalei l'sham izel aisili kamsa, ozel aisili bar kamsa. The guy tells his shamish, his servant, make sure to get me my friend Kamsa to come to the party. Go get him. Tell him I'm throwing a party. Go get him. The butler made a mistake. Bar Kamsa made a mistake, and he brought Bar Kamsa to the party. The party is now in full blast, and the guy sees his enemy Bar Kamsa at the party. Ashkechei hahu Davi Yosef Amalei Michti hu Gavra Bal de Bobe du Gavra hu Maboy Hacha Kum Puk. So the guy says to Bar Kamsa's enemy, "What are you doing at my party? I hate you. You're my enemy. Get out of here." Amalei, remember, years later, Abaya asked Rav Dimi, that's how we introduced it this morning. Abaya asked Rav Dimi, what are people in Eretz Yisrael very careful about? And he said, we're very careful now about insulting anyone in public. And there's a reason why in Eretz Yisrael they became very careful about not insulting people in public. Now let's see what this story is about. So Bar Kamsa says to the owner, please don't insult me. Don't throw me out of the party. People see I'm here. Whatever I eat, whatever I drink, I'll pay you for my food and my drink. Just don't throw me out. I'm Dafnun Vav now. So the guy, we don't know the guy's name. The guy says, you can't stay here, get out. So Bar Kamsa says, please don't throw me out. I'll pay you for half the cost of the whole party. He says, no, get out. Bar Kamsa says, please don't insult me. I'll pay for the whole party. Don't throw me out. He says no, and at this point, the guy is already frustrated. He physically picks up Bar Kamsa and throws him out of the party and publicly insults him. Amalei loy knocked up Yod Bukmei for Afkin. Bar Kamsa is now thrown out of the house, sitting there embarrassed. Bar Kamsa is sitting there on the sidewalk, embarrassed. And he says to himself, at the party inside this house, there were Talmidei Chachamim, and they were sitting there. They watched me publicly embarrassed. They didn't tell the guy, stop, leave him alone. He physically picked me up and threw me out. They didn't tell him to stop. At least Talmidei Chachamim are sitting here watching this. It must be that shaming other people and physically harming other people is okay with them. They have no problem with this. You know what? I'm going to get even with these people. I'm going to go to the Roman Caesar and I'm going to be malshit. I'm going to muster on these people. They don't even have the common decency to stand up for a person who's being publicly insulted. I'm going to get even with a whole bunch of them. Now, what's interesting here at this point, just to note, Rabbi Yochanan said that Yerushalayim was destroyed because of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. Question 1. What does Kamsa have to do with the story? Kamsa is one of the guy's best friends. He's a guy that got invited to the party. Apparently, he never showed up. The butler went to get Kamsa. By mistake, he got Bar Kamsa. Kamsa's not at the party. Why is Rabbi Yochanan saying Yerushalayim was destroyed because of the story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa? Kamsa, first of all, is friendly with the guy. Second of all, he never even showed up to the party. He's not there. What do you want from Kamsa? Second of all, who's the biggest guilty person here? It's not Kamsa, who never showed up. It's not Bar Kamsa, who got publicly embarrassed. Who's, quote-unquote, the villain in the story? The Balabayas, who picks him up and throws him out and publicly embarrasses him. What's his name? I don't know. The Gemara doesn't say. The Gemara says the two names are Kamsa, who never shows up at the party, and Bar Kamsa, who's insulted at the party. And who is the guy that did the insulting? I don't know. The Gemara doesn't tell us his name. Okay. We have two kashas. Why is Kamsa involved in this? He never showed up. He's a good guy, l'chayra. And what's the name of the real bad guy here, the owner of the party? We don't know. Okay, let's continue. So Bar Kamsa says, I'm going to get even with these people. Amalei Lekesa. So he treks his way up to Rome, or wherever the Roman Caesar was, and he says to the Caesar, Mordu Bach Yudoi, the Jews have revolted against you. Go get them. Amalei Mi'ema. So the Caesar says to Bar Kamsa, where do you get your information from? Where do you see the Jews have revolted against me? Amalei Shodile Kurbana Chazis Imakarvin. Why don't you send an animal to the Beis Hamikdash? A goy is allowed to bring a korban to the Beis Hamikdash. We learn it out of a pasuk in the Torah. Why don't you take an animal and send it to the Beis Hamikdash and see how loyal these Jews are to you? If they follow halacha, they'll sacrifice your animal. If they're not going to follow halacha and they want to spit in your eye and not accept your korban, you'll know they're revolting against you. So give me an animal, I'll bring it to the Beis Hamikdash, we'll see if they sacrifice it. Ozil shoda biyode egla tilsa. V'hadid ka'asi shoda be'muma be'nifso sai v'amle v'dukin sheba'ayin duchted lidan have muna detu la muno. So Bar Kamsa gets the animal, he's taking it to Beis Hamikdash. On the way to Beis Hamikdash, he makes a little slit in the animal's lip, or a little blemish in the animal's eye. It's such a kind of blemish that a goy, when he sacrifices on a bama, we're not going to get into that, he can bring a korban on a bama. It's not considered a mum for a goy. But in the Beis Hamikdash, it's a mum and you can't bring the korban. So what do we do now? Bar Kamsa walks into the Beis Hamikdash. He has this animal that has a little split in the lip, or a little cut in its eye, and you can't bring such a korban in the Beis Hamikdash. Now you got a problem inside the Beis Hamikdash. You got the animal from the Caesar. It has a blemish. Do we sacrifice it with the blemish, or we do not sacrifice? We reject it, and then we get the Caesar really upset, and he comes down here and he kills a whole bunch of Jews and burns down all Yerushalayim. What do we do now? Sover Rabbanan Lekerube, Mishum Shalom Malchus. A certain group of Talmidei Chachamim in the Beis Hamikdash, Paskin, they held we should offer this blemished animal on the Mizbech just to keep peace with the Roman Caesar. It's an Aveira. You're not allowed to bring a korban that has a blemish, but it's an Aveira. It's allowed. Protecting the lives of the Jewish people so that the Roman Caesar doesn't come down here and kill a whole bunch of Jews is more important right now than this one Isser of bringing an animal on the Mizbech, shech the animal. Amalahu Reb Zechariah ben Avkulis. Reb Zechariah ben Avkulis spoke up. Zechariah ben Avkulis is a Tana, and he speaks up in the Beis Hamikdash. Yoru balei mum krav l'kami mizbeach. He said, no, I hold you not allowed to sacrifice this animal on the Mizbech because people may hear, a rumor will go out that today in the Beis Hamikdash they sacrificed an animal that had a slit in its lip or had some kind of blemish in its eye. And the whole story won't get out. And people will hear this and they'll say, oh, it's now permissible to bring korbanos that have a blemish. So Zechariah ben Avkulis is concerned about this, which is so far a good thing, right? The whole sugya starts with Ashrei Adam Mafachet Tamid. Fortunate is the person who makes a decision but thinks through all the ramifications. We'll see what happens. This is not all the ramifications. He came to a dead end. To Reb Zechariah ben Avkulis, the dead end was, we will sacrifice this animal on the Mizbeach, and a rumor will get out that an animal with a blemish in its lip or its eye is permissible now on the Mizbeach, and people will think this. Why will people think this? I mean, the whole story won't leak out that it's the Roman Caesar's animal. And if the and if the whole story doesn't leak out, what exactly is Reb Zechariah ben Avkulis scared about? A Yid's going to think that you can bring an animal with a split lip or a cut in its eye to the Beis Hamikdash for a korban. Okay, so the next day, after this animal, the Caesar's animal, was offered on the Mizbeach, some Yid comes and says, I want to bring this as a korban. I'm sorry it has a split lip, but I heard yesterday you offered a korban with a split lip in it. So the Kohanim are going to say to him, Reb Shmelka, yesterday we offered the animal with the split lip because it came from the Caesar, and mitam shalom malchus, we offered it as Mizbeach. But you can't bring an animal with a split lip. You're not the Caesar of Rome. The Caesar of Rome can kill Jews. So Rabbi Yid, go home. If you want to bring a korban, bring a regular animal. So this first chash of Reb Zechariah ben Avkulis is a very unusual chash. Don't sacrifice the animal because a message may get out from the Beis Hamikdash that you can bring blemished animals as a korban. Okay, so apparently Reb Zechariah ben Avkulis was the biggest posek in the Beis Hamikdash, and they accept his psak, even though the other Talmidei Chacham said yes, offer it so that the Caesar doesn't come and kill Jews. Reb Zechariah ben Avkulis says no, do not bring a korban on the Mizbeach because Jews may say you're allowed to bring blemished animals, and that's what they do. We're not going to slaughter it. Apparently, Reb Zechariah ben Avkulis was the biggest gadol in the Beis Hamikdash. Sovel Amikdala. The next thing the Talmidei Chachamim start talking about is to kill Bar Kamsa. He has the din of a roidev. He's come here under a scheme to upset the Roman Caesar so that the Roman Caesar will come here and kill Jews. This is a scheme on his part to cause Jews to die. He has din of a roidev. Kill him. The loylezel v'leimer. He shouldn't go back and tell the Caesar. Amalahu, and they're ready to kill him. The Talmidei Chacham are ready to kill him. He's a roidev. Reb Zechariah says again, I don't hold like that. Reb Zechariah ben Avkulis says, you know what's going to happen? The story's going to leak. There's a story going to leak. It's going to say that Bar Kamsa put a split in the lip or a blemish in the eye of an animal that was supposed to be a korban, and we killed him. What will Jewish people learn from that? That if you intentionally put a blemish in an animal that's supposed to be a korban, the Chachamim will kill you. You're chayav misa. And you're not chayav misa. It's a terrible thing to take an animal that's supposed to be a korban and make a mu'min intentionally. It's a terrible thing. but you're not chayiv misa for it. So if Zechariah says, no, we're not going to kill him because another leak will happen. People will say, we heard that the Akamsa put a blemish in the lip, put a blemish in the eye, and they killed him in the Beis HaMikdash. The halacha must be, you kill a person who puts a blemish in the animal. Of course, that's not the halacha. So we're not going to kill him either. Reb Zechariah ben Avkula is the Gadol, and they listen to him also. So they're not going to kill Bar Kamsa. They're not going to slaughter the animal. And that's it. Bar Kamsa goes back to the Caesar and says, guess what? I was right. They wouldn't accept the animal. They're not loyal to you. Go get him. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan made the following comment. Remember, Rabbi Yochanan is the same Rabbi Yochanan who at the beginning of the sugya, about 20 minutes ago, Rabbi Yochanan said, fortunate is the person who is always worried about his decisions. Rashi explained to us he sees the long-term ramifications of his decisions. Fortunate is such a person. And then he says, because of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, Yerushalayim was destroyed. And now Rabbi Yochanan is going to place the blame on the Gadol Hador. It looks like the Gadol Hador. Everyone in the Beis HaMikdash had a different opinion, and Reb Zechariah ben Avkula said his opinion, and that was it. They followed his opinion. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, so Rabbi Yochanan said, Am b'sanusay shel Reb Zechariah ben Avkulas. Reb Zechariah ben Avkula says humility. What does this humility have to do with it? We don't have time to go into that today. But because of Zechariah ben Avkulas was such a humble person, and he wouldn't kill Bar Kamsa, and he wouldn't allow us to bring the animal on the Mizbeach. He wouldn't allow us to kill Bar Kamsa, and he wouldn't allow us to bring the korban on the Mizbeach. Hechrives Beiseinu, it's because of his humility that the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. V'sof es Heichaleinu, and the whole Heichel got burned down. We know what the Heichel is. V'iglisanu, me'atzeinu. And Jews went into exile because of Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulas. Because of the humility of Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulas, amazing. Now, when I used to say Shir in this Gemara on Tisha B'Av in Baltimore, you just read the Gemara. The people came over to me after Shir and would say they're very uncomfortable with this Gemara. Because Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulas, the Chayr, is the Gadol Hador. And the Vilna Gaon, in fact, says that he was the Gadol Hador. He proves that Reb Zechariah ben Avkulas was the Gadol Hador, even though you can't find Reb Zechariah ben Avkulas anywhere came out in Shas. There's a place you can find him, Masechta Shabbos, about a machlekes about bones on a table on Shabbos. Are you allowed to touch the bones to clean off the table, or the bones mukta, etc.? But this Gadol Hador, Reb Zechariah ben Avkulas, who was a Tana, anybody hear of him in a Mishnah? No. Zechariah ben Avkulas is the Gadol Hador. The Vilna Gaon proves it, he's the Gadol Hador. And Rabbi Yochanan, who is now Moira, Rabbi Yochanan lives sometime after Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulas. Zechariah ben Avkulas is a Tana. Rabbi Yochanan is now Moira. Rabbi Yochanan, looking back at this story, he criticizes Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulas. He criticizes him in a way. He points a finger. He says the humility of Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulas destroyed the Beis HaMikdash, had the Heichel burned down, and caused the Jewish people to go into exile. That is an incredible indictment for Rabbi Yochanan to make of a Gadol Hador. The Sforim talk about this. But what do we get out of this? Rabbi Yochanan began the Gemara and said, Ashrei Adam Mefachet Tamid. Fortunate is the person who fears, is considerate, he considers his decisions and the full ramifications, Rashi says, of his decisions. Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulas couldn't do it. That's why Rabbi Yochanan, and that's what the Mefarshim say. Rabbi Yochanan introduces the story and says, I want you to understand the pasuk of Ashrei Adam Mefachet Tamid. And I'm going to tell you now the story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, and a story about a rooster and a chicken, a story about the side of a wagon. But the first story I'm going to tell you, Rabbi Yochanan, says about Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. And the story about Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, the end result of the story is it demonstrates Shlomo HaMelech's wisdom when he said, Ashrei Adam Mefachet Tamid. Fortunate is the person who is not living in this little bowl and only sees what's in front of him and understand that whatever he does has tremendous ripple effects, and he has to have enough seichel to see the full ripple effects. Now, a lot of us, in fact, probably none of us can see the full ripple effects of what we do. But to the extent we can think about what we're doing, Who will be affected by it? How will it affect? Good for the bad. How will it affect us tomorrow? Ashrei Adam Mefachet. Fortunate is a person who lives life that way. The criticism of Rabbi Chaim, of course, he didn't live it that way. He failed here. A terrible thing to say, but I'm not saying it. Rabbi Yochanan said, of course, now there are all kinds of drushes in the Gemara in different svarim where they try to turn it around and reinterpret the Gemara, and it's fine. It's all good for a drusha. We're reading the Gemara Kipshutai with Rashi. That's what the Gemara says. Rabbi Yochanan says, "On the Sanusei Shel Bechaya ben Afkulis, destroy the base Hamikdash, destroy the Heichal, and sent us into exile." Because he stopped. The only thing he got concerned about were leaks. If we bring the animal on the Mizbeach with the blemish, the information will leak and people will say an animal with a blemish can now be brought in the Beis HaMikdash. No is us. And they'll come to the Beis HaMikdash and they'll try to bring a korban with a blemish. The kohen will say, "I'm sorry, but you let it yesterday. Yesterday was the season." It's not the biggest chashash in the world. And if you kill Bar Kamsa, people will say, "Oh, he put a blemish in it, he's chayav misa." They'll ask and they'll say, "Is a person that puts a blemish in an animal chayav misa?" We'll tell them, "No, it happens to be that Bar Kamsa was a roiv." Rabbi Zechai ben Avkulis didn't go the step further. And they were begging him in the Beis HaMikdash to go the step further. The Chacham in the Beis HaMikdash said, "Let's bring the animal with the blemish, Mishum Shalom Malchus. Let's keep peace with the Romans. If we keep peace with the Romans, we can continue to live. Whatever the conditions are to the Romans, but we can live. We can have a Beis HaMikdash, and as long as we have a Beis HaMikdash, and Yetz Hashem, we can do tshuva." The Beis HaMikdash wasn't running in the greatest way already at that point of time. We know that. 420 years into the Beis HaMikdash, second Beis HaMikdash, even earlier than that, things weren't going well. And they need a lot of tshuva. But as long as it's up, we can be metaken. As long as it's up, we can do tshuva. We can make the place better. So they're begging in the Beis HaMikdash, Mishum Shalom Malchus. Let's do this Aveira. Let's bring a korban with a blemish on the Mizbeach, because we have to balance things. There's an Aveira to bring a korban with a blemish, but how do we save Jewish lives? The Caesar's going to come here and kill a whole bunch of Jews and burn the building down. Now let's balance this. Rabbi Chaim of course couldn't get to that last step. He got just tied down to the halacha says you can't bring an animal with a blemish, and the halacha says you don't kill a person that puts a blemish in an animal. And then he felt let the chips fall where they may after that, because that's what the halacha says. And Rabbi Yochanan says, "Asher yodam afachet tamid." Fortunate is the person who goes the full distance that he can and thinks through. If I tell them not to slaughter the animal, and if I tell them not to kill Bar Kamsa, what do I think is going to happen here? Yeah, probably good chance the Romans are going to send an army here and kill everybody. Maybe we ought to kill Bar Kamsa. Maybe we ought to bring the korban. Maybe I ought to listen to the other Chachamim here. He couldn't do that. This is such, and the Sfarim say that the stories, this story and the chicken and the rooster story and the side of the wagon story, there's not just stories about the Churban Beis HaMikdash. These are stories that Chazal are telling us to deduce from these stories a certain type of conduct that resulted in tragedy, in destruction, and stay away from this kind of conduct when you have the opportunity, when it's there in front of you. Understand the story of Kamsa Bar Kamsa. Understand the chicken and the rooster. Understand the side of the wagon. Understand what caused the horror. It was looking with such a narrow scope at what's in front of you, and the inability to be an Ashrei Adam Mefachet Tamid, the inability to take the bigger picture into consideration. Right now, what's in front of me? An animal with a woman. Right now, what's in front of me? Bar Kamsa. And Bar Kamsa is not chayav misa, and the animal is a mum. We're not doing anything. Yeah, but the Caesar's coming. But the Caesar's not in front of me right now. It's not part of my psak. People have to have the sense. The Gemara is teaching us not a little story about Kamsa by Kamsa. The Gemara is teaching us, Rabbi Yechon says, learn how to make decisions. Because if you don't think through the ramifications of your decisions, the ripple effect of what you're doing, destruction can come from it. So this is a lesson for life of how to make decisions and consider the ripple effects. And again, take a look at Mesil Shon Perikutes Barakov about a person wants to do the big mitzvah. He has to think about how it will affect others, how it will affect me, what will affect me tomorrow and the next day. And if it has any bad effects, stop. So the Gemara is teaching us here a tremendous lesson in the Churban of Tisha B'Av. Learn how to make decisions. And in this time, Erev Tisha B'Av, you need to learn how to make decisions. He said this for several days. I'm going to repeat it again for everyone's benefit. There are all kinds of shilas that come up on Tisha B'Av. Eating, drinking, washing, all kinds of shilas. There's a bigger picture. Everybody needs to understand there's a picture. There's the halacha about you can't eat. Halacha you can't wash. We dealt with alcohol gel. All kinds of halachas. Those are the halachas. The bigger picture, as I talk about every day, is that Rebbeinu Shalom wants healthy, living Jews. He wants us to understand the ripple effect of certain of the things that we do, even if it's a question of halacha. The halacha says you're not allowed to put an animal with a blemish on the mizbeach. Very good. But I may have to do it because I need to save the lives of Jews. Otherwise, the Roman Sea is going to come and kill everyone. But the halacha says you're not allowed to put an animal with a blemish on it. Don't you hear me? Don't you hear me? If I don't put the animal in his be'ah, Jews are going to die. Rabbi Yochanan says Rabbi Chaim ben Avkulis was guilty of not being able to be Ashrei Odom Mefachet Torah. All decisions in life have to have this kind of consideration to the extent humanly possible. And as we come now, the Tisha B'Av, still plenty of time for Mashiach to come, mamish today. Decisions need to be made. Ask a Rav if you have shilas. Don't assume anything. These are real shilas given the health situation today. The heat outside. The corona, the magefa that's outside. There are real serious shilas about keeping Jews alive today. And those shilas need to be asked. There are all kinds of psukim that I read about. Some of them I don't understand Bechlal. I'm not going to talk about that. I don't understand some of these psukim coming out. One psak came out that if a person tested positive for COVID but is asymptomatic, he has to fast on Tisha B'Av. I don't understand where that comes from. I don't understand what universe that comes from. But Yeh Mashiach, other poskim have already spoken that if a person tested positive for COVID, if he has no symptoms, he is not to fast. But there are all kinds of shilas. Without COVID, a person's age, a person's health, the heat, a person feels weak after so many weeks being locked up in the house or being limited to where you can go. It's affected a person emotionally, mentally, etc., etc. People have become weakened from this whole thing over months. And a person can be in a state of weakness. What does that mean for fasting on Tisha B'Av? All these things are shilas that need to be asked. What we learn from Rabbi Yochanan is you don't automatically do something and not consider the life and death effects that it may have. If it have a life and death impact, we need to consider it in the halachic equation and make a proper determination. Those Yidden that need Yeshua should have Yeshua, those Yidden need Refuah should have Refuah, those Yidden Nechamas should have Nechamas, Yidden need Brach should have Brachas. Yeshua's Refuah's Nechamas Brachas only come from the Rebbeinu Shalom, the Echad Yachad and Yuchad. When we understand that and absorb that concept, it's a Gilui HaYichud for ourselves. It perfects us, and it helps us perfect the whole world around us. And with the perfecting of the perfectly imperfect world, we bring Mashiach closer. And if we can accomplish that, we still have hours today to accomplish that. And then, Yetz Hashem, we'll drink a l'chaim tomorrow. We'll trek up to Yerushalayim. We'll watch the Beis Hamikdash go up because we know how it's going to go up with the Beis Hamoked, with the Pinchas Hamalbish, with the Ezras Noshim, with the Heichal, the Menorah, the Tisha HaMizbeach. We know these things. We're going to watch and understand it. should be zeicher to see it mamish today, tomorrow. Everybody's gesund, and they have the same today. To the extent that we have to fast, it should be a meaningful fast. It shouldn't be just a fast of a wasted day that you didn't eat, but it should have some meaning to it. Sei gesund, have a meaningful fast, make the right decisions. If you need to speak to a Rav, speak to a Paisik, speak to him before Tisha B'Av. Sei gesund.